This is the final part of our series on Machiavelli, Discourses on Levy. Chapter 6 of the third book of Conspiracy. It is a long chapter, which I'll be reading in summation and without comment. We begin with a quote from Cornelius Tacitus. He says that the past shall have our reverence, the present our obedience, and that we should wish for good princes, but put up with any. For whosoever does otherwise is likely to bring ruin both on himself and on his country. On the subject of conspiracies being a source of danger to both princes and to private men, many more princes have lost their lives in states through these than in open warfare. The power to wage war upon a prince is limited to a few, but the power to conspire against him is denied to none. Since conspiracies are attended at every stage by difficulties and dangers, no more hazardous or desperate undertaking can be engaged in by any private citizen. While many conspiracies are planned, few affect their object. We have to first examine against whom conspiracies are directed, and we shall find that men conspire either against their country or their prince. Of those conspiracies which are directed against the prince, and inquiring into their causes, which are manifold, one is more momentous than the rest, the being hated by the whole society. For it may be assumed that when a prince has drawn upon himself this universal hatred, he must also have given special offense to particular men, which they'll be eager to avenge. After menaces to life, injuries to property and honor stir men more than any others, and of these a prince has most to beware. For he can never strip a man so bare of his possessions as to not leave him some weapon wherewith to redress his wrongs, nor ever so far dishonor him as to quell the stubborn spirit which prompts revenge. Great are the dangers which men run in conspiring, for at all times they are in peril, whether in contriving and executing or after execution. It is only the solitary plotter who escapes the first of these three stages of danger. He runs no risk before executing his design, since he imparts it to none, there are none to bring it to the ear of the prince. A deliberate resolve like this may be conceived by a person in any rank of life, high or low, base or noble. There are many who in their minds desire the deed. There is no punishment or danger attending the mere wish, though there be few who dare do it. For since few or none escape death, few are willing to go forward to certain destruction. But to pass from these solitary attempts to those in which several are engaged, I affirm it to be shown by history that all such plots have been contrived by men of great station, or by those who have been on terms of close intimacy with the prince, since no others, not being downright madmen, would ever think of conspiring. Even men of great position, who have ready access to the prince, succumb to the difficulties which I shall presently notice. Those difficulties must be infinitely increased in the case of men who are without these advantages. Because when life and property are at stake, men are not utterly reckless. On perceiving themselves to be weak, they grow cautious, and though cursing the tyrant in their hearts, are content to endure him, and to wait until someone of higher station than they come forward to redress their wrongs. The prince who would guard himself against plots ought to fear those men to whom he has been too indulgent, than to those whom he has done great wrongs. For the latter lack opportunities which the former has in abundance, and the moving cause is equally strong in both, lust of power being at least as strong a passion as lust of revenge. Therefore, a prince should entrust his friends with only so much authority that an interval is left between his position and theirs, that between the two something be left for them to desire. Treachery is to be looked for, because you can impart your plans only to those you believe ready to face death on your behalf, or to those who are discontented with the prince. Of men whom you can trust implicitly, one or two may be found, but when you open your designs to many, they cannot all be of this nature, and their goodwill toward you must be extreme, if they are not daunted by the danger and by fear of punishment. Moreover, men commonly deceive themselves in respect of the love which they imagine others bear them. nor can they ever be sure of it until they have put it to the proof. But to make proof of it in a matter like this is very perilous. And even if you have proved it already, and found it true in some other dangerous trial, you cannot assume that there will be the same fidelity here, since this far transcends every other kind of danger. Again, if you gauge a man's fidelity by his discontent with the prince, you may easily deceive yourself. For so soon as you have taken this discontented man into your confidence, you have supplied him with a means whereby he may become contented, so that either his hatred of the prince must be great indeed, or your influence over him extraordinary. Hence it comes that so many conspiracies have been discovered and crushed in their earliest stage, and that when the secret is preserved among many accomplices for any length of time, it is looked upon as a miracle, as in the case of the conspiracy of Piso against Nero, and in our own days, in that of the Pazzi against Lorenzo and Giuliano de' Medici. Though more than 50 persons were privy to it, it was not discovered until it came to be carried out. Conspiracies are also disclosed through the imprudence of a conspirator when he talks so indiscreetly that some servant or other person not in the plot overhears him, as happened with the sons of Brutus, who, when treating with the envoys of Tarquin, were overheard by a slave who became their accuser. And whenever more than one conspirator is arrested, the plot is certain to be detected, because no two persons can perfectly agree in a false account of what has passed between them. If only one be taken, should he be a man of resolute courage, he may refuse to implicate his comrades, but they must have no less courage to stay quiet where they are, and not betray themselves by flight. For if courage be absent anywhere, whether in him who is taken, or in those still at large, the conspiracy is revealed. Your first and surest, nay, to say truth, your only safeguard, is to leave your accomplices no time to accuse you, and never communicate your design until the moment of execution. Or it should be to one only, one whom is well known and known to be moved by the same feelings as yourself. To find one such person is far easier than to find several, and involves less risk. For though this one man may play you false, you are not left altogether without resource, as you are when your accomplices are many. For I have heard it shrewdly said that to one man you may impart anything, since, unless you have been led to commit yourself by writing, your denial goes as far as his assertion. Shun writing, therefore, as you would a rock, for there is nothing so damning as a letter under your own hand. In imparting a plot to a single person, there are two risks. One, that he may come forward of his own accord to accuse you. The other, that if arrested on suspicion, or on some proof of his guilt, he may, on being convicted, in the hope to escape punishment, betray you. But in neither of these dangers are you left completely without a defense, since you may meet the one by ascribing the charge to the malice of your accuser, and the other by alleging that the witness had been forced by torture to say what is untrue. We see, too, what I remarked almost at the outset of this discourse, that the threats of princes expose them to greater danger than the wrongs they actually inflict, and lead to more active conspiracies. Therefore, a prince should be careful not to threaten, since men are either to be treated kindly or else gotten rid of, but never brought to such a pass that they have to choose between slaying and being slain. As to the dangers in the execution of plots, they may result from changes made to the plan, a failure in courage, some mistake due to lack of foresight, or from not giving the affair its finishing stroke, as when some were left alive when it was meant to put them to death. Nothing causes so much disturbance and hindrance in human affairs as to be forced, at a moment's notice, and without time allowed for reflection, to vary your plan of action and adopt one different from the first. For in these affairs there is nothing so essential that men be prepared to do the exact thing entrusted to them. But when men have turned their thoughts to doing a thing a certain way and in a certain order, and the way and order are suddenly altered, they should find themselves disconcerted and the whole scheme ruined. The conspiracy of the Pazzi against Lorenzo Giuliano de' Medici is well known. The scheme agreed on was to give a banquet, at which the brothers would be put to death. To each of the conspirators a part was assigned, to one the murder, to another the seizure of the palace, while a third was to ride through the streets and call upon the people to free themselves. But when the Pazzi, the Medici, and the Cardinal were assembled in the Cathedral Church of Florence to hear High Mass, it became known that Giuliano would not be present at the banquet, whereupon the conspirators, laying their heads together, resolved to do in church what they would have done elsewhere. This deranged the whole scheme, for one would have no hand in the murder if it was to be done in a church, and the distribution of parts had to be changed. As those to whom the new parts were assigned had no time to nerve their minds to the new tasks, they managed so badly that they were overpowered in their attempt. A conspiracy against a single ruler may readily break down in its execution, but a conspiracy against two is not only difficult, but so hazardous that its success is almost hopeless. For to effect like actions at the same time in different places is well nigh impossible, nor can they be effected at different times, if you would not have one counteract another. If conspiracy against a single ruler be imprudent and dangerous, to conspire against two is in the last degree foolhardy and desperate. The Pazzi, of whom we have spoken so often, succeeded in murdering Giuliano only. In conspiracies which are directed against more heads than one, all should abstain, for no good is to be got from them, whether for ourselves, for our country, or for anyone else. On the contrary, when those who are conspired against escape, they become harsher and more insufferable than before. It now remains for us to consider those dangers which follow after the execution of a plot. These, in fact, resolve themselves into one, namely, that some should survive to avenge the death of the murdered prince. The part of avenger is likely to be assumed by a son, a brother, or other kinsman of the deceased, who in the ordinary course of events might have looked to succeed to the princedom. Conspiracies against country are less dangerous for those who take part in them than conspiracies against a prince. There is less risk beforehand, and though there be the same danger in the execution, there is none afterwards. Beforehand the risks are few, because a citizen may use means for obtaining power without betraying his wishes or designs to any, and unless his course be arrested, his designs are likely enough to succeed. Nay, though laws be passed to restrain him, he may strike out a new path. This is understood to occur in a commonwealth which has to some degree become corrupted. For in one wherein there is no taint of corruption, there being no soil in which evil seed can grow, such designs will never suggest themselves to any citizen. In a commonwealth, therefore, a citizen may by many means and in many ways aspire to the princedom without risking destruction, as republics are slower than princes to take alarm, are less suspicious, less cautious, and look with greater reverence upon their great citizens. Those citizens are, in this way, rendered bolder and more reckless in their attack. However, the execution of plot against country is attended with greater difficulty and danger, since in conspiring against many, it seldom happens that your own resources be sufficient by themselves. Princes have no worse enemy than conspiracy, for when a conspiracy is formed against them, it either carries them off or discredits them. If it succeeds, they die, while if it be discovered, and the conspirators be put to death themselves, it will always be believed that the whole affair had been trumped up by the prince, that he might glut his greed and cruelty with the goods and blood of those whom he has made away with. Let me not, however, forget to warn the prince or commonwealth against whom a conspiracy is directed, that on getting word of it, and before taking steps to punish it, they endeavor, as far as they can, to ascertain its character, and weigh the strength of the conspirators. Knowledge of the plot should not be disclosed until they are ready with a force sufficient to crush it, for otherwise its disclosure will only give the signal for their destruction. They must strive, therefore, to seem unconscious of what is going on, for conspirators to see themselves detected or driven forward by necessity, and will stick at nothing. A prince or commonwealth desiring to retard the execution of a conspiracy should create some special opportunity soon to present itself. The awaiting conspirators, believing that they have time to spare for what they have to do, will afford that prince or commonwealth all the leisure needed to prepare for their punishment. Where conspiracies are weak, however, they may and should be put down without scruple or hesitation. Two methods, which are in no way recommended, have occasionally been followed in dealing with conspiracies. One of these was adopted by the Duke of Athens, who, to have it thought that he confided in the goodwill of the Florentines, caused a certain man who gave information of a plot against him to be put to death. The other was followed by Dion, the Syracusan, who, to rally the intentions of one whom he suspected, arranged with Callippus, whom he trusted, to pretend to set up a conspiracy against him. Neither of these tyrants reaped any advantage from the course followed, for the one discouraged informers, and the other prepared an easy road to his own death and a conspiracy against himself. For Callippus, having free leave to plot against Dion, plotted to such effect that he deprived him at once of his state and life.